Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of the Guilt-Free Book Club. We're looking at Teach Students How to Learn by the good doctor, Saundra McGuire. Checking out chapter 8 this afternoon, which is what faculty can do to boost motivation, positive emotions, and learning. So why don't we start just by going around and you share your name and what you do at your university and just an impression that you have from the chapter, something that stayed with you. So I'll start. My name is Josh Luckins. I work as an instructional designer here in the Teaching and Learning Collaborative at the Wentworth Institute of Technology. And for me, chapter 8, I just love the way that Dr. McGuire integrated kind of the science that we know about human motivation and all those theories that have been developed through research and kind of took that high level thinking and brought it down into these really discrete and actionable strategies that people can use in their classrooms and also kind of in life in general, because human motivation goes beyond the classroom, goes into all interactions that we have. So that's my takeaway.
I'll jump in next, if you don't mind. My name is Megan Hamilton Giebert. I am an instructional designer at Wentworth, and I enjoyed this chapter for the same reason that Josh said of it's very discrete, actionable items. It's also almost a little overwhelming, the number of options available, the number of strategies available. So I do have some, likes and dislikes about how they're organized and classified, but the appealing part about it is instructors and anyone working with students has the ability to pick and choose what they're curious about, what works for them, and then adjust as needed going forward. Rita Marie, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I'm Rita Marie Hensley. I'm an instructional designer at Simmons. And again, I'm going to repeat what you guys said. It's about the strategies. And I actually like that she offers, so many, but then she kind of lets you off the hook at the end. Towards the end, she's like, just choose one or two, you're fine. So I feel like any style of teaching, you could be willing to choose one or two because you'll find something in that chapter.
Hi, I'm Tom Bacho, Associate Director of Academic Support at Wentworth. I thought this chapter was interesting, and I did appreciate that there was a list, and I too thought it was good that the entries like, you don't have to do all of these. And it's like, oh, okay, good. Some like, I don't know. I thought it was interesting, like the autonomy was listed as an element of motivation. I also found useful the part where she was discussing like the specificity of maybe what you're saying in terms of like how to use like a metacognitive learning strategy or things like that. Like I thought that was interesting. I don't know, eat well and exercise. Everyone's like, yeah, okay, but if you're like doing this, eating this particular, like a more specific medical advice, people are more likely to listen. And I was like, oh, that rings true. Like that feels like it has utility.
Yeah, I enjoyed that element too. Sometimes it's just saying an old method in a new way to spark new interest in it and to hook people, and make them curious about trying it. We do have our collaborative notes doc today that includes a list of all 21 strategies. Josh, if you have a link to it, or I can post it in the chat, or we can.
I'll get that up for us.
Okay. Yeah. Or we could both like try to be overly polite and wait for the other person to post it. But no, let's thank you, Josh, for getting that. And Saundra McGuire organizes them according to a common motivational theory, where autonomy is one of the components of motivation, one of the aspects of whether a task can be motivating or demotivating, depending on how much control and agency you have over it while working on it. So you can review the strategies. They're also on page 94 of the book. And then in the rest of that collaborative notes doc, Josh and I have added some of our favorite quotes from the chapters that you can take with you and think about. Feel free to add your own. And then there's also a section for us to gather up some takeaways, maybe some new insights based on our conversation today. If you'd like, you can also put down a commitment to action based on a particular strategy you might be curious about. And I do realize that we are doing this book club at a very demotivating time in the semester. And so given that, we might cut this session a little bit short today. If you do have things you're ready to try on your calendar competing for your time and attention, but we do want to create the opportunity to reflect and discuss and see how some of the insights from this chapter can help us move forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to share the document just for posterity and future viewers to be able to see what it looks like. We could put a link online possibly to it. We don't want just anyone from the internet to come in and mess it up. But for you all, feel free to add any conversation takeaways. Feel free to add any commitments to action if you think of anything that you would either do yourself or suggest to any faculty or tutors or whoever you're working with that they might want to implement. And then also if you have any favorite quotes from the chapter, that's also a great place to look. And of course, those 20 or 21 strategies are right here. So with that, I will stop the share and just let's start on that. We'll kind of break down those 5 categories. I love the way that Saundra McGuire uses Raffini's 5 categories for how students can be intrinsically motivated. And actually, just to kind of frame it a little more, Megan and I were talking the other day about Dan Pink, who has this really famous TED Talk about these 3 factors of intrinsic motivation: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I rewatched that TED Talk, which I'd seen many years before, and realized that he was talking a little bit more about applying those in the context of creative tasks, the type of work that you might find in a 21st century workplace, and kind of spinning the science of human motivation towards more of a business context or an innovation context. And that obviously has applications for education, particularly as we're asking students to do higher order thinking tasks. But this guy Raffini, took the same studies and really broke it down more deeply into 5 categories that apply more directly to, specific educational contexts that include both higher order and lower order thinking tasks. And I thought that was really, really cool. And I thought that, as Tom said, so much of it when I was reading the chapter just resonated with my own personal experience, that it just seems like very intuitive. It makes a lot of sense. And it begs the question, why is it that that in education we don't sometimes do some of these common sense things? And there was a moment in the chapter where Saundra McGuire's like, hey, like, do you ever feel like your students aren't that motivated? You're like, but then you realize they're super motivated to socialize and play video games and look up shoes while you're lecturing. And so like they have motivation. There's things that are that are sparking them to take action in the world. So how could we design learning experiences that do those things? Because then the learning is going to be more impactful and long lasting. So let's talk about each of those 5 categories. The first one being enhancing autonomy. When have you all experienced that kind of, in an educational or learning context, that having some autonomy or choice has been, made you feel more engaged or made you kind of, want to dig in more deeply? Have a look at the strategies that she provides, those 3 strategies, either in the collaborative notes document or on page 94. She provides these 3 examples for enhancing autonomy, allowing students, participants to choose what they're going to do in a project or lead things in different ways, whether it's discussions or papers. To do goal setting exercises to really enable them to feel ownership over the learning process. And then, of course, the last one, which I love, is this whole attribution theory and kind of giving them a kind of metacognitive eye, stepping out of where they're, how they're looking at the world and their studies, to be like, oh, wow, like I am attributing what's going on in any given moment either to some external factor, like it's that crazy professor's fault, or it's, some factor that's external to my actions for why this is happening, or internally, oh, maybe it's because I'm not good, or maybe it's because I worked hard and that's why. So there's kind of these ways to influence their, or empower them with new ways of seeing and doing, as well as, just in the specifics of how you design your class. So now that we've gotten a chance to think through some of those specific applications of autonomy, what resonates with you? What have you seen to be effective, and what have you experienced as effective in your work, either as a instructor or as a student?
I really liked what she said about having students choose project topics. I don't know, when I was a student, like it was more likely I'd be kind of excited to do the work if I could pick my own topic. Like I know, I was trying to reflect on like, what was I doing like high school or college, and I recall like a freshman, it was basically like a survey course on like East Asian history, and you got to pick the topic, and so for like the 20-page paper at the end, that was like most of your grade. And so I remember like picking my topic, which was on like the Muslim minority in China through history, and I got really like interested in like reading about it, and it like stuck. Like I remember much more about that aspect of that class than some of the other things that were just from the lecture. And like as some that kind of came around, that was a while ago, like it came around back, like that the persecution of that minority is like in the news now, with like the essentially like concentration camps for like the Uyghur minority. And it's like, oh, like it's helpful to me that I was kind of allowed that autonomy to pick that, because I both remembered it, I got a little more invested in it, and it like helped me connect it to things maybe I would learn from just like the news or other places. So I appreciated that. And I in addition to doing like the tutoring, I usually teach like a math class a semester, and so like the one I'm teaching now, it lets them choose their project topic, and like some just kind of pick whatever and they kind of do it, but some like you can tell genuinely get excited about it. Like at last semester I had a student, he picked his topic was like analyze, trying to analyze like the statistics around like shots taken by like a hockey player. And I was like, oh, and why did you choose that specific hockey player? And he's like, well, it's my favorite player. And I was like, oh, that's a good reason, actually. Like you care about it, and like he's a very good hockey player, so it would make sense that you would want to analyze how he takes his shots. So yeah, it's nice when you can see them kind of get that excitement because they had a choice in the matter. Hopefully, I think it helps like learn better too, right? And like it's something that resonated with you. Like that was kind of my personal experience with the thing I remember from that class was the thing I chose to learn about.
Yeah, I mean, I think offering choice is always good because then the students can kind of go with their strength as well, not only their interests, but maybe they can do something creative because they're better at that than they are maybe writing a paper, or just to kind of have a break with always writing. But I thought, just taking it from the position of either an instructor or an instructional designer, it's like, how do you encourage instructors to do the goal setting? Or to even have this discussion with students about seeing it differently. Those, I thought they're really good strategies, but how do you get others to buy into it and to actually try it in their classes? Because as she kept bringing up, they want to cover so much content, and that's always, I got too much to cover. How can I possibly do this goal setting with them? Or, even the discussion about how you see things after a test is the perfect time. It wouldn't take long, but you still have to get people to buy into that concept to actually do it. So
I agree. Sometimes it's hard to time when to try out some of these strategies. I know mid-semester, after both instructors and students have sort of, acclimated to the class environment, introducing a new convention or feature may be a little bit jarring. And so as we're closing in on the end of the semester, maybe that these are, ideas to think about in integrating into a future semester, maybe having a 5-minute like goals chat and check at the first class of each week. Developing some sort of convention from the start of the semester is a little easier than trying to stuff it into what already feels like an overstuffed semester. So that's why I do like kind of the pick and choose aspect of a lot of these strategies too.
Absolutely. Another really lovely way this notion of choice dovetails is with universal design for learning, because obviously, not only are students going to be able to pick topics that they are excited about and are going to be intrinsically motivated to dive deeper into and really more meaningfully apply the concepts and then take that forward into the rest of their life, building a new worldview based on what they've done in the class and in the project, but having that multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression is going to just benefit all students because it's going to allow multiple ways for people to kind of access the content and interact with it in ways that promote their learning that's works best for them. So I think that's wonderful. And another thing I just wanted to share is this morning I was in an engineering design thinking class here at Wentworth, in which the students are in small groups, and for their final project, they get to apply the kind of design process that they've been studying and all the theories of lean thinking and these different ways of doing engineering design thinking into a project of their own creation. And part of the fun was just seeing how the students, each group, identified a market need based to design something to, basically based on their own experiences and what they really are excited about. Some of them used coding a little bit more of that computer focus. Some of them used, electronics a little bit more, and they were literally tinkering with and creating, photovoltaic cell phone charger panels that could be used in camping trips or whatever. And you could see the passion light up because it was like as if they were making a pitch to investors. I mean, in that their presentations, because it was really, they had that choice and they had that autonomy. And then they were all able to see, how each group followed the engineering design thinking process and the steps that they'd theoretically talked about in really different ways as they, iterated their own projects. So I thought that was a great example of kind of using this notion of autonomy in a classroom. And just to tie it back into learning objectives, it's possible to construct learning objectives that really have to do with those types of skills, those types of, patterns of thought and thinking skills and habits of mind rather than just specific content. And then therefore to be able to build assessments like these that are more, student driven and have different options that can be in line with those types of learning objectives. So that's just another thought that I wanted to offer. Before we move on from enhancing autonomy and those 3 strategies that Saundra McGuire proposes, any last thoughts to wrap up the role of autonomy and enhancing intrinsic motivation in students?
Not really a wrap-up thought, but more of a segue. In some of the concepts y'all were discussing here, I heard the elements of the other motivational pieces. So, competence, do they, and self-esteem, do they believe they can succeed? Do they know what they need to do in order to succeed? Josh, you talked about how the students are working in a group. This is a group project, so that contributes to the belonging and relatedness aspects of motivation. So my mind is trying to paint a broader picture here, and I'm hearing all of those motivational components sort of emerge kind of outside the lines of their specific boxes. So
that's fantastic. And I think that really reflects your learning, right? Because when we learn more deeply, we suddenly see connections between all the different elements, and those invisible threads of, what's connecting them become visible to us as we get deeper and deeper in our understanding. So that's wonderful to be able to see that in action. So let's move on to number two, to enhancing competence. So Saundra McGuire talks about giving really clear and explicit expectations and instructions to your students, both with each assignment, but also in the syllabus in general. And as you frame the course, what the goals are, where we're going, kind of weaving that back in and weaving that purpose, the why, the how, the big picture, stepping back, taking that perspective throughout the semester to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page and are able to make those bigger connections between what's going on. And, just like enhancing autonomy made me think of universal design for learning, enhancing competence in this particular bullet point makes me think of tilt, transparency in learning and teaching. And so it's neat to see, as we've talked about before, how all these different frameworks really do come together to form best practices in teaching and learning, and everyone's kind of got their own way of putting it, but they all kind of align in meaningful ways. She also discusses, testing early and often, not just in terms of a actual test or quiz, but just formative assessments, low stakes assessments that are going to be able to give students a sense of where they are, metacognitively understand where they are in the learning, and also give a professor a chance to adjust accordingly. But really the importance in terms of motivation of giving students early moments of success. So those initial assessments are going to be super hard and make people like, oh, I'm never going to be good at this. They're going to give them moments of be like, oh yeah, cool, I do get this. I can do this. So and what we find in terms of human motivation, and this rings true from my experience, when I have an initial moment of like, I'm getting this, I'm okay, I'm doing well, then I come up against a challenge. I'm like, well, you know what? I've been doing well so far, so I can probably do well, keep going forward. But if at first I'm really frustrated, it's going to be a lot harder for me to keep that kind of growth mindset going forward, because I'm going to be like, well, gosh, if from the get-go I'm not doing well, then that's not great. And so that's a learning design issue, that you as a professor can design the learning experience to give students early moments of success, to enhance their motivation to go forward, and resilience in terms of meeting future challenges. So she also talks about using a 1 minute class session, maybe at the end of class, to reflect takeaways, exit tickets, what'd you get out of it, remaining questions, that kind of thing, to kind of cement the learning and have that make those connections in the mind. And just making sure that every 10 minutes or so there's some sort of break, if you're just doing a lecture style class, to give students a chance to make meaning out of it, whether it's a introspective writing activity, or they try to solve a problem, or they're working with a pair, doing a pair share, trying to do something together, or else they, as she says in the chapter, physically or in the brain won't be able to take in as much of what you're doing. And then making sure your feedback is really targeted and clear with actionable takeaways, and students really understand what they're being assessed on, why, and what they can do to improve. So those are some of her tips for enhancing competence. What connections do you all make between some of these ideas and some of your experiences as a learner or as a teacher?
So I'll chime in with the learner experience. I hate wondering what I need to do in order to succeed in the course. I hate trying to read my instructor's mind and hope that I'm writing a paper that will earn a magical A through some mystical process that only my instructor understands. So the idea of clear expectations from the beginning, here's what you do to succeed, and then providing targeted feedback, specifically with a rubric, those seem like essentials for me that would help me succeed in a course, and that I want to see our instructors eagerly adopting in their courses for the sake of our students.
Yeah, I thought this part in particular offered so many different strategies that instructors can apply immediately. Because I just think it's just good practice to do something every 10 to 15 minutes that's interactive. We all, our minds drift. I mean, that's, students have a million things on their minds, just like everyone else. So if you have that interconnection, something every 10 to 15 minutes, break it up a little bit, think about what you just learned, talk it over with the person beside you. I just think that's a really good practice. I also liked, because she talked about the exit ticket, which I know that's, pretty common practice, but she made sure that she said, even if you don't read them, it's still an exercise for students. Because sometimes I feel like these strategies, the instructor feels like we're putting even more on them, but students can get a lot out of focusing, an exit ticket, believing that you're going to read it. And if you do, it's so easy just to flip through index cards, to get a feel. But if you don't, that's okay too, because it's something good for students. So I like that she said that.
I thought the discussion of like just how you structure the course, how like earlier often testing is matters. And I mean, it's something I like, I don't know, like when I'm thinking, because I feel like there's like just inherent trade-offs with like time, like or I don't know, like I know like kind of like what Megan was saying, like I don't know, tests seem like they're just so tied to like how much a student is motivated, because they kind of have like the stakes behind them, I guess. And, and people that come into the tutoring center that often feel, it seems like it's very demotivating when it's like, the test was not similar to what we covered in class or had on the homework, or it was much harder than what was covered in class or on the homework. Like that's something that like, sometimes the students use the tutoring sessions as like an opportunity to complain. And that's like, if that happens, that's one of the more likely things to do. But in terms of like, I don't know, like I think it's interesting, like thinking about like the structure of the class, like it seems like a lot of times some of the students that struggle are ones that for whatever reason like miss like a week or two, maybe like they added on late, or I don't know, like they're on a sports team, they had a concussion, like, and so like it feels like there's a tension between like doing it more frequently reduces the stakes for each individual one, but it increases the likelihood like someone either misses a test or missed the content for that test because it was a shorter interval. So like, or, when you do a really early test, it's maybe very doable for everyone except for the person that like registered on like the add drop deadline and like missed half the material. And like for them, it's like they've been in this class 3 days and now they have a test. And even though it's like small and easy and it's not worth much of the grade, maybe it kind of has like the opposite effect. So I really like the idea of kind of early and often testing it. The implementation, just given the constraints and like the heterogeneity of like some of the students' different experiences, it's challenging to kind of get the exact right balance. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that you're raising awareness of some of the the cons of these strategies. Barriers to successful implementation of these strategies, because no, not all our students are going to be in the exact same learner mindset or learner situation. So yeah, and I get that we are asking essentially instructors to pack more things into an already stuffed suitcase, trying to keep in mind the differing headspaces of their students. So yeah, that's all that to say, I'm acknowledging that you're right. There are challenges to trying to implement some of these strategies.
For sure. And I think each one is going to be totally individual to the particular course and that particular instructor. And there's going to be some, I think, where they might want to put together a system where, out of all the assessments, it's communicated that the lowest, 1, 2, whatever, 3 of those grades will be dropped, because there's an understanding that, maybe you did miss that class or you did have a bad week or whatever, and that's okay. Or maybe there's more of a no stakes approach where actually these types of formative assessments are not part of the grade, but they're a part of your learning process. And as long as it's communicated and clear to students, why we're doing this and how it's helping and whatever, then maybe there'll be that buy-in. Again, going back to that kind of motivation. And continuing along with the expectations with what you said about how, you get these students in the tutoring center who are like, I didn't expect this, what the homework was like this, the test was like that. And that goes back to that motivation. That's demotivating. So, finding ways to kind of communicate, make sure that what is in faculty's heads and what students are hearing are more aligned, with regard, especially to those kind of levels of Bloom's taxonomy, where that homework might just be on a lower level, and then on the test, all of a sudden they're asked to apply it. Well, if they haven't been asked to apply it before in the context of, work where they can get feedback and practice, then that isn't really fair. So maybe there's ways to redesign those types of assessments. And then one other thing I wanted to bring up was just the notion of providing examples. I love that in the chapter. She was like, when I had to write my first grant application, I Googled, sample grant applications, just what we as humans do. So, if we're able to give students, we're giving them a project that's a bit more challenging, we can say, here's three examples. Here's three examples and here's the rubric. One is a really excellent level, one's kind of middle, and one's not that great. Why don't you all look at it and tell me, make a case for which is which, and tell me why, identify what's working, and then they'll have a better sense based on that activity, not only of what to aim for, but what's how the grades are working, and get a sense for that. And also it'll be kind of done in a constructivist way where the students are building their own understanding by engaging in the process rather than just being told. Because as Rita Marie said, the most active people are in the room and most actively engaged in doing something are going to be the ones doing the most learning. So whether it's asking them to self-assess or make that exit ticket, it's really about the professor facilitating opportunities for learning for those students, because that's our goal. And if the reality is that more learning is going to happen from a student perspective if they have a chance to reflect and cement their learning in the last 2 minutes of class than if you were able to squeeze in 2 minutes more of lecture, because whatever that happens is going to be in one ear and out the other, let's be honest, while they're packing up. So just thinking about the course delivery less as like, what am I going to do as the professor, and more about what am I going to ask the students to do so they can be the ones making meaning actively and having a meaningful learning experience. So before we move on to enhancing belonging and relatedness, any last thoughts about enhancing competence? All right, well, let's move on to our third strategy. Our third motivational strategy is enhancing belonging, kind of a sense of students belonging to a community of learners, a community of inquiry, belonging to the discipline itself, and relatedness, a sense of relationship, not only with peers, but also relatedness that this topic really is relevant in their lives and in the world, and how it's going, they're going to be able to take it forward. So she proposes a few strategies, including kind of community building at the beginning of class. And this isn't in Saundra McGuire's work, but I've read a good deal of research about how building a strong community of learners and building those types of relationships particularly supports the success of traditionally minoritized students. And that's just kind of a key point in multicultural education that we know to be true through studies. And it's the type of thing where even though it, is proven to more impact a particular group that is disenfranchised, it actually impacts everyone and helps everyone. So it's one of those types of interventions that's really effective across the board. And just to emphasize a point she said of like, oh, that takes a little bit more time at the beginning. That's true, but it pays a lot of dividends later on as you have students that are working more effectively together. They're communicating more effectively. They're being able to go deeper, quicker. So it's the type of thing where that advanced work kind of pays dividends later. She talks about authentic assessment, assigning authentic real world projects where students really see the impact of it and they're able to see how using this they could make a difference. So I love authentic assessment. We could do a whole other topic on it, but that's a beautiful one. And then promoting cooperative and group learning. So giving opportunity for students to engage in that type of collaborative work, which obviously not only is good pedagogical practice to have multiple ways for students to show what they know and work together and learn from each other, but also is going to be good preparation for a 21st century workplace where we are ever more collaborative. And so that's just a good practice in higher ed for training, the workforce of the future. So what thoughts do you all have about these strategies, or just this general topic of enhancing belonging and relatedness as a motivational strategy to help students feel more intrinsically motivated in your classes?
I'll go first if y'all want. I am thinking of, again, the timing of the semester and how a lot of this belonging and relatedness does start at the beginning of the semester in your day one routine with your students. So, given the timing of our session, we're coming up on the end of the semester, start thinking about what your next semester first day is going to look like. How can you increase belonging in your syllabus design so it's got a welcoming and inviting tone? What introductory activities can you do on the first day that start building that community from the start so it becomes a place of learning and trust and support for all your students? Again, hard to stuff into this suitcase right now in this semester, but in terms of growing and changing for the next one, be designing your day one intentionally with belonging and relatedness in mind.
Yeah, I really like this part about sense of belonging. I'm glad it's part of it because I think belonging is pretty much everything. I've done a lot of research with first gen students, and that's one of their biggest hurdles is they don't feel like they belong. So, and I love that you said the syllabus, because right away you need to make that first impression, that it's welcoming and you're going to be successful in this class and I can't wait to meet you kind of thing. But you're right, it needs to be from day one that you start these, and then you got to keep going with these kinds of activities. And big fan of group projects or cooperative learning, that kind of thing, because not only for their future work, but just I think it really helps a sense of belonging if you have just even a few individuals that you feel like you can turn to, ask questions. You get that comfort level with a few classmates. Maybe you start studying together, etc. So I love that a sense of belonging was part of this motivational strategies.
Yeah, I don't have much beyond just reiterating what I said. I like the point about the the tone of the syllabus. Sometimes the inclination is to make them sound very almost like legalese, and maybe that's not, especially the first page. It's not what the tone you want to be setting. And, yeah, the importance of that first day, really.
Love it. Awesome. All good strategies. And one other story I want to share. I don't remember if it was from Saundra McGuire or from somebody else, but there's a great story about an adjunct math professor who had this first generation student in his class who was really struggling, with the content. Came up to him after class one day and was like, I think I might have to drop this class. And the professor started talking to the student more and kind of got a sense that it had to do more with a sense of lack of belonging not only in the community, but also just not feeling like this material really they were part of it or they had access to it. And he was like, you know what, for tonight, why don't you forget about the math homework, leave that. I want you to look up imposter syndrome, read about it, and come back and talk to me tomorrow. And the student came back and he was like, oh my God, I read about it and that was me. Like I had no idea this was a thing. I thought I was the only person in the world feeling this way. It turns out it's a whole thing. And maybe that was the issue and it wasn't the math. And, he came in for some extra help, got some tutoring, ended up doing really well in the course and staying on and, getting that major. But, that one intervention related to belonging was actually what was keeping that student, was the barrier in the way of that student succeeding. And the professor was able to see that and offer that one little thing, being flexible and kind of offering that new perspective. So it's just a great anecdote to kind of support the notion of intrinsic motivation, motivation being so key to student success. And sometimes it doesn't even have to do with the content, it has to do with the learning environment broadly. Any other thoughts about belonging and relatedness before we move on to our fourth strategy? Well, I think it's a great segue that we just had into the fourth, which is enhancing self-esteem. So, Saundra McGuire, we talked at length about discussing mindset and attribution theory. Did this happen because of something that I did or because of some external factor, and in the role of emotion in learning, social emotional learning, explicitly discussing that with students so that they're kind of can gauge where they're at and kind of maybe shift their mindset. And then really humanizing yourself as an instructor, letting them know that you've struggled with this, that this was not easy for you when you first learned it, because I love there's this moment in the chapter where she's like, students tend to look at us as these kind of omnipresent, powerful automatons. And it's like, no, if you kind of make yourself human, then students can really relate to you a bit more and take a deep breath, relax, and kind of be more genuine and real in their struggles and kind of work through it together. Providing those early moments for success, as we've discussed, and reflecting with students on what they've done when things went well, so they can keep doing them, and when things aren't going as well, reflecting and then offering some strategies for how to improve and maybe take a different tactic. So, what thoughts do you all have about enhancing the role of social emotional learning, enhancing self-esteem, and in as it relates to intrinsic motivation? Maybe some experiences you've had as a learner or teacher, or just any other thoughts you have about this idea.
I mean, I think especially working a lot with students on math, which is maybe like notorious for someone being like, I'm not a math person, it doesn't click for me. Like sometimes just like inviting them to, or give credit to themselves. It's like, but you just did all that stuff, and you're saying you're stuck on this part, and you're not a math person. But it's like, but what about all the stuff you did? Like, like, and sometimes yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like sometimes just pointing out their successes, maybe the things they can do, they take for granted in ways that are, damaging to the self-esteem, to like do the stuff you haven't figured out yet. And, the power of like, growth mindset type things. But
yeah, I love what you shared there, because it reminded me of a thing from another reading of a teaching tip to remind students how much they've accomplished so far. Like the things you're asking them to do week 10, they could not have done week 1. So, just reminding them of the journey they've been on. And yeah, we still got 5 more weeks to get through, but, trust me, you can do it. I believe you can do it. And then that's the other thing I hear in the self-esteem piece is the quote from Saundra McGuire that I ended up putting on one of my favorites. But it says, I have been bowled over by the number of students who, when we first met, were completely unwilling to work, but who, as soon as I expressed support and belief in their abilities, became willing to do enormous amounts of work. So what I like about this self-esteem piece as part of motivation is that's an easy one that you can implement, right? It's not going to take a whole class session to just tell your students you believe that they can succeed. So you can take that opportunity basically at any time when working with your students.
I think all of what you said, yes, of course, but I think that let your students know you're human is really big, because so many, put professors in this certain box that, super smart and you'd never be able to relate. And it doesn't, I don't even think you have to share that you struggled with the subject if you really didn't. I mean, but share yourself, just whether you're an online teacher and making a video and your dog comes in the room, that's great. Like, show your dog, introduce your dog, just that kind of, just showing you're human. And I think they love that. And then it just breaks down that barrier of, being the separate entity that doesn't relate. So.
Absolutely. And I think that connects so well to enhancing involvement and enjoyment, which is our next category, because it's like, yeah, there's so many ways to enhance that type of involvement. And one of them is just being real, with people. And I think everyone appreciates that genuine and authenticity and sharing your passion genuinely and sharing your struggles genuinely and sharing the thing you read in the newspaper that relates to the class and what you've been thinking about when you were falling asleep because, you were inspired by something someone said last week. I mean, that really draws people in and sticks with people. Another thing that stuck with me from the book was just that when she describes that student who was struggling with, converting between cubic centimeters and, cups or whatever it was, she's like, once she explained how, they saw examples of how those conversion errors can be lethal, literally lethal in, pharmacies or hospitals. All of a sudden, those students who were kind of like, they got really good at converting between, centimeters and whatever, because they realized there was very important. So there's a lot of ways to enhance involvement and enjoyment and produce that motivation that aren't just kind of like, let's have some fun. Although having some fun is good because people fun tends to motivate people to do more of it. That's why your students might be motivated to play video games because they enjoy it. So how could we enhance that type of enjoyment in our classes? And she has some suggestions, including connecting what you're doing to the students' interests, as Tom gave that hockey example, or giving them choice to let them make those connections themselves, because how would you know? You'll learn something from them. Introducing, moments where the students get to actually teach, which is of course a fantastic strategy to see where they're at, because then you'll know. And also then they're the ones doing the active thing and learning. And we know that when you have to teach something, you have to have a high level and a deep level of understanding about it. So that's another great strategy, whether that's to the whole class or in small groups in a jigsaw, whatever the activity might be. Gamifying things, making them into having some sort of game structure is a lot of fun as well. And that's a whole other topic for another time. But another last one is to give students something at the beginning of class that they're supposed to do, whether it's kind of a detective search, look for this as we're going on, or by the end of class, you're gonna have to share this, that, or the other. So there's something that they're kind of looking for and kind of looking out for, maybe together, whatever it is, to kind of spark that curiosity and continuing interest. So examples of that, of enhancing involvement and enjoyment that you may have experienced as a teacher or a student.
I really love games personally. I think learning games are fun. I'm a big fan of Music Jeopardy myself, but I'm trying to turn that into a classroom learning experience rather than just a Megan's DJ experience. But one great example of games in action that I saw is I got to observe an instructor who did a Kahoot game, used a tool called Kahoot. And so as her students were coming into the class, they would essentially do this quiz and compete for points and achievement on these, zany interactive quiz platform. And it seemed like a great way to just acclimate the students to the learning environment, but also give them something fun to do while they're getting situated.
Yeah, this was teaching high school, but the students made the Kahoot, which that takes care of the teaching, but then, the rest of the class really enjoyed their questions and how they framed their questions. And, then it got competitive. And so that's always good. It's funny. I loved the question at the beginning, and you'll turn something in at the end. And she even gave the example of like a one sentence summary of, I guess some concept or whatever. And I thought that was just, I don't know, I hadn't thought of that before. I mean, I know we have exit tickets, but it's great to say it at the beginning because then they're constantly thinking throughout the class. So I love that one.
Something that that made me think of with the Kahoot is just such a great next level thing of like, yeah, the teacher could stay up late and make their Kahoot, but the students actually get more out of it if they make the Kahoot. So not only are you saving yourself work, you're actually giving them a better learning opportunity when they get to make the Kahoot or the game or the activity or to design the thing. So I think that oftentimes, instructors might read this chapter and be like, oh my God, so much more work. But it's like, actually, what if there's a way to structure it so that your students are the ones doing the work, which is good because the people doing the work are doing the most learning. So to use some of these strategies to integrate them into your learning design or the lesson plan or the homework design to give these options for more enjoyment, more involvement that are in fact going to be, intrinsically motivating and provoke more learning. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah. So we can talk a whole lot more about this, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk more about kind of gamifying and playful pedagogy and stuff at another time. But just to wrap up, she has this bonus strategy, which is partnering with your campus learning center. And we have a representative of our campus learning center here, the one and only Tom Baccio. So what do you think? What would be your elevator pitch, to faculty of how could they most effectively partner with our campus learning center to promote student success?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of it really, like the faculty, like students, I think disproportionately will attend the tutoring from like certain faculty. I think it really, like a lot of it's like how much the faculty just bring it up in class. Like I think sometimes just, encouraging students to make a habit of it. I think they're more likely to get something out of it if they're doing it regularly. If the instructors, it's really important to be doing. If you're just showing up to class and that's it, maybe that's not the most you're going to get out of it. I think even just kind of like repeating it in terms of getting people to go. And I think just reaching out, like there's plenty of times where an instructor says like, hey, like there's this thing my students aren't getting, like could we design a workshop or something? There's certain like, at Wentworth, certain like high stakes testing that happens in certain courses, like the calculus courses, it's called like the Gateway. I've partnered with faculty on making a workshop for that, and those were pretty well attended, especially when it's a partnership between us and the faculty. If we just put it on, maybe or maybe not, the students will go, but when we put it on, there, we can get the tutors there, so there's more individual attention than if it was just the instructor's office hours, which I think by reputation students maybe also don't go to. But having the instructor's buy-in, the instructor promoting it, those have been the most successful. It's a little rambly for an elevator pitch, but I guess that would be what I would say.
That's fantastic. And Rita Marie, how does it work at Simmons? Do you all also have a learning center, and how do the partnerships tend to work between maybe, the faculty development group and the learning center and the faculty in general?
Yeah, I know we have one, but I don't know that much about it. So obviously they need to work more on getting the message out to us, because I really don't know how students find out about it or if instructors are mentioning it at all. It's just never been brought up to me. So I'm glad to read, more about it so that I can find out more, see how it's used, especially the idea of a workshop. That if they're putting on a workshop at maybe the instructor's request, I can see how that could be really successful.
Opportunity to collaborate is all I was going to say. Opportunity to explore and learn more.
Yeah.
Josh, how about you bring us home here? We're coming up on
Totally,
the
you
hour.
got it. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, it's interesting. Tom and I are on a search committee now, talking to candidates for the Success Studio to bring on a tutoring coordinator, and it's like there's all this. It seems like there's an emphasis in some of our questions about like, yeah, collaboration with other offices, but what exactly that looks like, it's pretty up in the air, and by that I mean up to us. And there's a lot of room for that type of collaboration and expertise to be brought together. But it just takes the initiative of folks getting to know each other and working together and being like, yeah, what could we bring forward? So I think that's really cool. And I think that Saundra McGuire, what she really offers is this incredible experience and expertise. And one of the key takeaways I have from her books is just like, you know, she's seen so many students whose the barrier to them succeeding is not their ability to do math, chemistry, or whatever it is. It's the fact that they just, don't have those specific skills at learning that they didn't learn in high school for whatever reason and here we have an opportunity to empower them with some of those skills. And it shouldn't be just the student who happens to hear about and have the initiative to go to the tutoring center who gets that. It should be something that we as instructors, are integrating into the way that we teach, to really support the success of all students equitably. So that's one of my big takeaways from her work. Anyone else have anything else to share before we wrap up? Well, thank you so much for joining us at our third book club. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully you can join us in 1 month's time as we'll finish up our read of Teach Students How to Learn, and keep on coming in the future. If you have any other books or articles or whatever it is, videos that you might be interested in kind of talking about or bringing forth to a larger group, just let us know. We'd be happy to collaborate with you and make that happen.